We have fertility rates that are just spiraling. A teenager today, an American teenager, has less testosterone than a 68-year-old man. Sperm counts are down 50%.
Wait,
so
an American teenager has less testosterone than a 60-year-old man?
That's right, because the testosterone levels have dropped 50% from historic levels.
When you say something so stupid that even a Fox News host can't help but laugh in your face, that's when you know it's time to reevaluate your life. Although, what do I know? Because this man is the leading authority on health in the United States. He's the doctor and I'm not, so he must know what he's talking about. Oh wait, he's not actually a doctor. He's an attorney who knows fuck all about health and medicine. But if you listen to him talk, you'd never know that since he confidently speaks on health issues as if he knows what he's talking about when he doesn't. Now, in that clip, he was presumably blaming reductions in testosterone on petroleum-based artificial food dyes without evidence. Now, are there risks associated with artificial food dyes? Yes, evidence suggests that they could cause unwanted hair growth in women and even accelerate the production of lactic acid in adolescents, causing unnecessary fatigue. Actually, that's not true. I made it up. But you see, since I spoke with confidence, I might have gotten some of you to buy my bullshit. And that right there is RFK Jr.'s entire shtick, okay? He says the most outrageous shit, but it's believable to people who don't know any better since he spews his bullshit authoritatively and with confidence. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. So to give you a few examples, he's linked vaccines to medical conditions and autism. He's denied that HIV causes AIDS. He claimed that COVID targeted white people and black people and said both Chinese and Jewish people were immune to it. He blamed gender dysphoria on chemicals and also blamed school shootings on SSRIs. And we're barely scratching the surface. That's just some of the medical misinformation that he's pushed as an attorney, not a doctor, mind you. He also encourages people to drink raw milk, and while I hope that none of you watching take his advice, I do hope that he drinks lots and lots of raw milk. Bottoms up, RFK, drink that shit up. Please, please, for the sake of the country, drink lots of raw milk. But going back to his interview with Jesse Waters, he explains why he thinks it's necessary to do away with petroleum-based food dyes.
One of the problems is that the science about these additives has been systematically suppressed for 30 years because the industry has been running this agency. And we're getting rid of all of those conflicts. We've gotten rid of most of them. And we're going to do real science. And we're going to do science precisely on the issues that Americans care about, making sure their kids are getting food that isn't poison. The food our kids are eating today is not really food. It's food-like substances. And some of it was made in petroleum refineries. And we need to give our kids real food again. We've got the highest chronic disease burden of any country in the world. When my uncle was president, 3% of Americans had chronic disease. Today, it's 60%. 74% of our kids cannot qualify for military service. That is off the charts. Yeah. Again, when my uncle was president, we had about 11% of kids had obesity. Today, 74% of Americans are obese or overweight. And, in Japan, it's 3%. So, and that's because they pay attention to what they're feeding kids in school.
Yeah, the Japanese are very skinny, except for the sumo wrestlers.
Yeah, in case you didn't know, his uncle was the president, John Kennedy. Maybe you've heard of him. In other words, he's very important, and you should definitely listen to what he has to say about health, since that's who his uncle is. This is somebody who won the Lucky Sperm Club, and because of that, we all have to suffer. So thanks, Kennedy. You should keep producing bangers, and I wish you'd stop. If we can somehow take the Kennedys, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Trumps, and just give them their own island so they fuck off forever, that would be much appreciated. But if you listen carefully to that clip, at the beginning he said that the science on this has been suppressed. Now, I don't know if that's true. It's probably not, but that implies that we don't necessarily know why all of these health problems exist. But after saying that, he then goes on to speculate about potential harms of artificial food dyes, as if he knows for sure that they're causing these specific problems that he's talking about. Now, to be clear, I'm not defending artificial food dyes. They're completely unnecessary, and I'm fine with them being banned altogether. In fact, deregulations in general is a serious problem. So if he's going to go on a tirade against deregulation, I think that's great. He has my support in that limited sense. I think that we need more regulation so corporations can't cut corners and potentially poison us for profit. So good on him if that's his goal. And he's also not wrong about all of the health issues that plague our country. It's one of the many reasons why I think we should have a robust single-payer healthcare system so we can all prioritize our health without worrying about the costs. But of course, he doesn't support a Medicare for all single-payer type system, so I guess that there are limits to his concern about our health. But when it comes to food dyes, he's right that there hasn't been enough research done, but are they actually harmful? And to that I say, I don't fucking know. I'm not a doctor. And neither is he, but unlike him, I did the bare minimum and Googled it and stumbled across this Healthline article, which says that there's not much evidence of harm from most of the FDA-approved food dyes, and the available data for particular colors that have raised concerns seems inconclusive. So there's a small but significant association between food dyes and hyperactivity in some children. They may cause allergic reactions to people who are more sensitive, and as for whether or not they cause cancer, which is one of the main concerns, there's no evidence that that's the case for most of the commonly used food dyes, with the exception of Red 3, which 2 studies linked to thyroid tumors in rats, which led to a ban in 1990, which was later reversed after 4 studies concluded that the thyroid tumors weren't actually linked to Red 3. And since there's been concern about Red 3, it's mostly been replaced by Red 40, where there's no concerns, although it is still used in popular products like maraschino cherries, candies, and popsicles. So as the health secretary, I do appreciate an effort to be more scrupulous about what's being put in our food, but I don't appreciate his willingness to just assert something is true without evidence. Nobody would bat an eye if he realistically talked about the concerns of these dyes in our food based on past evidence. But when you insinuate that they're linked to a reduction of testosterone and sperm counts in young men, you make it hard to trust you, which is a problem since we need to be able to trust the person who's the Secretary of Health in the country, and we need to know that he's basing policy changes on empirical reality and not things that he pulled out of his ass. And part of the problem is that he seems to think that correlation equals causation. And I say this because there are valid concerns about testosterone levels and sperm counts falling, but there's no evidence that it's because of artificial food dyes. James Liddell of The Independent explains, over the past 5 decades, human sperm counts appear to have fallen by more than 50% worldwide, according to a 2022 review from the Human Reproduction Update journal. The review, which focused on data from between 1973 and 2018, sparked debate amongst fertility experts, with some medical professionals supporting the findings, while others concluding that methods of counting sperm have drastically changed over the years, making it impossible to accurately compare numbers. A 2020 study from the Yale School of Medicine, published in the Urology Times journal, suggested that testosterone levels have dropped among young adult males in the US from 1996 to 2020. So he takes a kernel of truth and then makes logical leaps based on that kernel of truth when he doesn't have the evidence to make these kinds of jumps. Not to mention he doesn't have the qualification to make these kinds of extrapolations, but since something is true or there's evidence for something, he then says, well, that is linked to this and this. So, he thinks that young men have less testosterone than older men, even though that's not what the study says, if he's basing his opinion on that. But, since there's seemingly more additives and preservatives in our food now than there was before, that must be linked to less testosterone and lower sperm counts. But it doesn't work that way, because one thing happened and another thing happened doesn't mean that that automatically is the cause. Like, correlation does not equal causation. And to show you what I mean by that, in this viral post on Twitter, these unqualified dipshits claim that vaccines cause autism because there's a correlation between the rise of autism and an increase in vaccinations. But as this person facetiously points out, there's also a correlation between autism and organic food sales. So by their own logic, organic food must also cause autism. And this person points out that autism is also correlated with inflation. Therefore, it must be the case that inflation is causing autism. I mean, you could do this with anything. This is why it's important to not assume that correlation equals causation, because anything can be correlated with something, but it doesn't mean that there's a causal relationship there. But that's what RFK Jr. does. And what I find perplexing is that he talks about the need to get to the bottom of what's in our food, which again, I support, yet HHS cut 20,000 jobs, including thousands at the FDA, which falls under his authority as well. And that has resulted in the suspension of milk quality tests and is in part why the agency is reportedly planning to end routine food safety inspections. And we haven't even touched on the layoffs at the NIH and CDC, which all fall under the umbrella of HHS. So on one hand, he's telling us corporations are poisoning us, but on the other hand, his agency is easing off of them, which makes it easier for them to shirk the remaining regulations that are still in place. So much for making America healthy again. But on another note, I'd be remiss to not bring up his near Nazi-like obsession with autism. And the reason why I'm describing it that way is because he is literally planning to collect private medical information to create a registry of autistic people. Now, what does he plan to do with said information? Well, he claims that he's going to use it for a robust study that's going to shed light on the cause of autism. And according to him, we're going to know much sooner than anyone would expect.
And we have, we have now the autism rates have gone from now most recent numbers we think are going to be about 1 in 31, 1 in 12, so they're going up again from 1 in 10,000 when I was a kid. And we are going, at your direction, we are going to know by September. We've launched a massive testing and research effort that's going to involve hundreds of scientists from around the world. By September, we will know what has caused the autism epidemic, and we'll be able to eliminate those exposures.
So we're supposed to believe that by September, we'll know the underlying causes of autism, and not only that, we'll know how to prevent it, according to him. Okay, spoiler alert, I'm assuming he's probably just going to say that vaccines cause autism. How else would he be so sure that he's going to know definitively by September? That's not how anything works. So I think what's probably going to happen is he has a conclusion and he's going to direct people in his agency to find evidence for his conclusion. Yeah. So needless to say, I'm going to be doubtful of whatever thing comes out of that report in September. But I've got to say, the way that he talks about autism as if it's some sort of a preventable disease is deeply fucking ableist. Autistic people aren't defective. They don't need to be cured. It's society that needs to become more accommodating and understanding of neurodivergent people. And part of the reason why we've seen a rise of autism is because we've expanded our understanding of autism and changed the criteria for diagnosing autism. And to be clear, when I say we, I mean scientists and neurologists, not people like myself who don't know what the fuck we're talking about. And Scientific American actually published a really interesting piece responding to him with current data, and basically they talk about how bizarre it is for him to try to reduce autism down to a singular cause. But of course, when you don't know what you're talking about and you're a charlatan, that's what you're going to do. But according to RFK Jr., autism is basically the worst thing ever.
This is an individual tragedy as well. Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children. These are children who should not be suffering like this. These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children.
Excuse me? They'll never pay taxes or hold a job? I think that the autistic people currently working a 9-to-5 paying their taxes would find that insulting. And anyone with a friend or family member that has autism or who is autistic themselves that hears them say that can just know this man does not know what he's talking about. He's talking about autistic people as if they have some sort of a crippling disease with the poorest quality of life imaginable, and neurotypical people just could never understand the agony of autism. And even though he's trying to come across as sympathetic, he's spewing the most hateful, reprehensible, ableist horseshit I have ever heard in my entire life. So suffice to say, I don't feel comfortable with this man putting my friends and family members with autism on a fucking registry. I don't trust him. Nobody should. But the elevation of charlatans like him speaks to a broader trend of anti-intellectualism in the United States. It's sending us down a very dangerous path where diseases that we've nearly eradicated have made a return. And even basic safety precautions for milk, for example, like pasteurization, now that's being called into question too. How long until they start to question germ theory? I mean, do you remember those toothpaste ads where they'd say 9 out of 10 dentists recommend toothpaste? Now I feel like we live in a society where a large number of Americans would specifically seek out the one dentist who disagrees and treat them like they have some hidden truth that the 9 other dentists are trying to keep from the rest of the public. It's just depressing. And the anti-intellectualism that we see combined with the lack of media literacy has gotten us to this point where the least qualified people are in the highest positions of power. In other words, we've devolved into a full-blown caucustocracy, which is depressing. And even though many of you, myself included, didn't sign up for this brainworm dipshit to be the leading authority on health, we're all stuck with him, at least for the foreseeable future. But even after he's gone, the seeds of destruction that he's planting will grow and have a ripple effect for generations. So good luck, I guess, because we're all going to need it out there.
Like everywhere there's glows. Mama. You see them all the time. I mean, it's constant. Mama. My children will be like, Mama, glow, 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 glow. I turn on TV, there's glows in the background. Every TV show, news media, why?
Glow, 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 glow. They're everywhere. Glow, 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 glow.